Most men will never admit this out loud, but their desire to kiss a woman there is not about lust alone. It is about power, safety, curiosity, and a kind of emotional surrender they were never taught to name. I am speaking to you not as someone trying to impress you, but as a female psychologist who has listened to thousands of private confessions men only share when they feel safe. When men are drawn to kiss a woman's most intimate place, it is rarely about technique or performance. It is about meaning. Deep down, that act represents trust. A man lowers himself, both physically and psychologically. He chooses vulnerability in a world that trained him to dominate. For many men, that moment is the only time they feel allowed to soften without being judged. There is also a biological truth men sense long before they understand it. That area carries powerful scent cues tied to bonding and attraction. The brain reads closeness there as acceptance, almost like being invited into someone's inner world. Men don't talk about this, but when they feel wanted enough to be close in that way, it confirms desirability on a primal level. It tells them they are not just tolerated, but chosen. Another layer most men never question is control versus surrender. Society rewards men for being in charge, decisive, and strong. But desire flips that script. Kissing a woman there is one of the few spaces where a man can focus entirely on giving rather than taking. For men who carry stress, pressure, and silent expectations, this act becomes a release. It allows them to be attentive, present, and emotionally tuned in without words. There is also an emotional mirror effect happening. When a man is down there, he becomes deeply aware of a woman's reactions. Her breathing, movement, and subtle sounds guide him. This feedback loop creates a sense of connection that feels almost hypnotic. Many men describe feeling calmer afterward, not more aggressive. That calm comes from emotional regulation, not conquest. What most women never realize is that many men associate this act with reassurance. If he wants to be there, it often means he feels emotionally safe with you. Men who are detached or purely ego-driven often avoid intimacy that requires patience and attentiveness. The desire to kiss there is frequently a signal of investment, not disrespect. If you are listening as a man, understand this about yourself without shame. Your desire is not strange or weak. It is human. It is your nervous system seeking closeness, validation, and peace in a world that rarely gives you permission to ask for those things openly. This is why dismissing this desire as something shallow misses the point entirely. Beneath it is a longing to be needed, to be trusted with someone's vulnerability, and to feel useful in a deeply personal way. When you understand this, you stop judging yourself and start recognizing what your body has been trying to tell you all along, quietly, patiently, and without apology. That awareness can change how you approach intimacy, relationships, and how you see yourself. What complicates this desire is the way men are taught to disconnect from their own emotional signals. From a young age, many men learn that wanting closeness is weakness, that tenderness must be hidden behind humor or confidence. So when a man feels drawn to that level of intimacy, his mind often scrambles to rationalize it as purely sexual. But the body doesn't lie. The body remembers what the mind tries to bury. In my clinical work, men often describe this act as grounding. That word matters. Grounding means returning to the present moment, to the body, to sensation rather than thought. Modern life keeps men trapped in their heads. Performance metrics, money, status, comparison. When a man is focused on a woman's pleasure in such an intimate way, his nervous system finally slows down. His breathing deepens. His attention sharpens. For a brief time, he is not being evaluated by the world. There is also a quiet fear attached to this desire that men rarely admit. Rejection at this level feels deeply personal. Being pushed away doesn't just bruise ego, it touches identity. Many men interpret acceptance here as proof that they are enough, and rejection as confirmation of a long-standing fear that they are somehow inadequate. This is why the subject carries emotional weight even when men pretend it doesn't. Another truth is that this desire often increases when emotional attachment grows. When a man feels connected, protective instincts activate. He becomes more attentive, more observant, more invested in a partner's emotional state. Kissing a woman there becomes an extension of care. It is not about taking pleasure, but about creating it. That distinction matters because it separates intimacy from objectification. Men who truly enjoy this closeness often score higher in empathy, even if they don't label themselves that way. They read microsignals. They notice shifts in mood. They respond to subtle cues. This is not accidental. The brain regions involved in nurturing and bonding are activated alongside sexual arousal. That blend creates a powerful emotional experience that men struggle to articulate. There is also a cultural misunderstanding that paints this desire as something men do to prove skill or dominance. In reality, the opposite is often true. The act requires patience, humility, and focus on another person's experience. For men conditioned to lead and control, this reversal can feel both terrifying and liberating. If you are a man watching this, notice what resonates. Not what you think should resonate, but what actually does. Desire is a form of information. It points toward unmet needs, unspoken longings, and parts of yourself that want expression without ridicule. Understanding this doesn't mean acting impulsively or expecting anything from a partner. It means recognizing that intimacy is not just physical contact. It is emotional exposure disguised as behavior. When men learn to read their desires with curiosity instead of judgment, relationships stop feeling like games to win and start feeling like spaces to grow. This awareness changes how you communicate, how you listen, and how you respect boundaries, your own and someone else's. And that shift is often the difference between shallow connection and something that actually lasts. There is a moment many men remember vividly, even years later, when intimacy stopped feeling performative and started feeling real. It is usually quiet, no audience, no proving, just presence. That moment often reshapes how a man understands desire, because it exposes a truth he was never taught. Intimacy deepens when control loosens. What many men mistake for hunger is actually attentiveness. When a man slows down enough to focus on a partner's responses, his brain shifts from goal-oriented thinking into relational awareness. This is where emotional intelligence quietly develops. He learns patience, not as restraint, but as attunement. He begins to understand that connection is not built by intensity alone, but by consistency and care. This matters because many men are exhausted by the idea that they must always initiate, lead, and perform. Over time, that pressure creates emotional distance. The body still wants closeness, but the mind guards against vulnerability. Acts of giving become one of the few socially acceptable ways for men to express tenderness without having to name it. It feels safer to do than to say. There is also an identity shift that happens here. Men often discover that their sense of masculinity expands rather than shrinks when they allow themselves to be gentle. Strength stops being about dominance and starts being about presence. This realization can be unsettling at first because it contradicts years of conditioning. But once experienced, it is hard to unlearn. In therapy, men frequently say they felt most connected when they were focused on their partner's comfort rather than their own outcome. That focus builds trust. Trust lowers defenses. Lower defenses invite authenticity. This chain reaction explains why emotional bonds often deepen after moments of genuine attentiveness. It is not magic. It is nervous system alignment. However, problems arise when men confuse desire with entitlement. Wanting closeness does not mean it is owed. True intimacy only exists where choice and safety are present. Men who learn to separate longing from expectation become more attractive, not less. They communicate respect through restraint and interest through patience. Another overlooked factor is self-worth. Men who feel valuable outside of sexual validation approach intimacy differently. They are curious instead of anxious, responsive instead of demanding. Their desire comes from abundance rather than fear. This is why self-improvement that focuses only on tactics fails in the long run. Without internal stability, intimacy becomes a way to regulate insecurity. If you recognize parts of yourself in this, there is nothing wrong with you. Desire is not the problem. Unawareness is. When you understand the emotional function behind your urges, you gain choice. You stop being driven and start being intentional. Intentional men listen more. They notice boundaries. They adjust. They understand that intimacy is a dialogue, not a performance. This mindset shift often improves every area of a man's life, relationships, work, and self-respect, because it replaces urgency with clarity. When a man no longer needs intimacy to prove his worth, he becomes capable of offering it as a gift rather than a demand. That distinction is subtle, but it changes everything. The deepest shift happens when a man realizes that intimacy is not something he earns by effort alone, but something that grows through emotional safety. Safety is created when presence replaces pressure, when listening replaces assumption, when desire is guided by respect rather than urgency. This is where many men either evolve or repeat the same patterns for years. Men often ask why some connections feel intense but short-lived, while others feel calm and enduring. The answer is rarely chemistry alone. It is regulation. When a man's nervous system is calm, he becomes more patient, more observant, more grounded. That calm allows intimacy to deepen naturally. Without it, desire turns restless and connection becomes fragile. One of the most misunderstood truths is that many women sense a man's emotional state before he speaks. They feel whether his attention is present or performative. When intimacy is driven by anxiety, it carries tension. When it is driven by care, it carries warmth. This difference is subtle, but powerful. It influences trust, openness, and long-term attraction. Men who grow emotionally stop chasing validation through intensity. They stop confusing closeness with control. They become comfortable with pauses, silence, and gradual connection. This does not make them passive. It makes them intentional. Intention is what allows desire to be expressed without pressure and received without fear. There is also a moment of self-respect that emerges here. When a man understands his own needs, he stops outsourcing his worth to reactions. He becomes selective, not desperate. Curious, not entitled. This inner shift often leads to healthier boundaries and deeper fulfillment. Even outside relationships, confidence becomes quieter but stronger. Many men spend years trying to unlock attraction strategies, not realizing that the most magnetic trait is emotional stability. Stability does not mean emotional numbness. It means awareness, regulation, and choice. It means knowing when to lean in and when to pause. Knowing when desire is connection and when it is compensation. If you are listening to this and feeling uncomfortable, that discomfort is information. Growth rarely feels flattering. It feels exposing, but exposure is where change begins. When men allow themselves to see their desires clearly, without shame or justification, they gain freedom. Freedom from confusion, freedom from repetition, freedom from proving. Intimacy, at its healthiest, is mutual curiosity. It is two people choosing presence over performance. When a man brings awareness instead of expectation, he becomes safer to connect with. When he brings patience instead of pressure, desire has room to breathe. Before you go, here is a question I want you to answer honestly, for yourself, and in the comments if you are willing. Are your desires coming from connection or from a need to feel enough? If this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe for deeper psychological insights, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it but may never say it out loud.